I finally worked my way up to the four-letter.
Music was once a healing balm for millions of hearts, but the very people who created it are dying in silence. They are R&B legends who once captivated the world, yet behind the glamour lie relentless, insane battles. A star who once shone on the White House stage ended up wandering naked and screaming in the dead of night. 21 legends. 21 horrific mental anguish. Are you brave enough to uncover the darkest truth? Watch it all to avoid regrets.
We don't need to escalate.
Donny Hathaway.
Flip, you make me laugh more than any other entertainer I know.
Thank you, Donny.
Few voices in soul music carried as much depth and vulnerability as Donny Hathaway. Known for timeless classics like A Song for You, he wasn't just a singer. He was a storyteller who could translate raw human emotion into sound. His collaborations with Roberta Flack remain some of the most celebrated duets in R&B history, capturing a rare intimacy that felt almost spiritual. But behind that angelic voice was a battle few could see. Hathaway was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a severe mental health condition that led him to experience hallucinations and intense paranoia. He reportedly believed he was being watched and that outside forces, including the CIA, were monitoring him. These fears weren't occasional. They followed him for years, quietly eroding his sense of safety and stability. One of the most chilling moments came during a recording session with Roberta Flack. In the middle of working together, Hathaway suddenly became distressed and stopped insisting they're listening to me. He walked out, leaving behind confusion and a clear sign that his condition was worsening. It wasn't drama. It was a mind under siege. On January 13, 1979, tragedy struck. Hathaway fell from the 15th floor of a New York hotel. He left no suicide note, only unanswered questions. He was 33 years old. His story forces an uncomfortable truth into the spotlight. A voice that helped millions feel understood could not shield him from his own internal struggle. Donny Hathaway's legacy is not just musical brilliance. It is a powerful reminder that talent and suffering can exist side by side and that mental health must never be ignored. James Brown.
I feel good. I knew that I would not.
No name in funk and soul looms larger than James Brown. With explosive energy, razor-sharp rhythm, and anthems like I Got You, I Feel Good. He didn't just perform, he redefined modern music. As the voice of Black power and self-determination, Brown stood as a symbol of strength, discipline, and control in a turbulent era. Yet behind that commanding presence was a far more complicated reality. In his later years, Brown exhibited extreme paranoia and erratic behavior. Reports from associates and law enforcement describe moments where he believed he was being watched or targeted. In one widely documented 1988 incident, he led police on a high-speed chase across state lines, later claiming people were out to get him. At other times, he reportedly isolated himself for days, convinced that unseen forces were setting traps around him. There are also accounts of him firing a gun inside rooms when no one else was present. Actions often interpreted as signs of deep fear rather than aggression alone. While no single widely confirmed psychiatric diagnosis defines his condition, many observers point to a combination of paranoia, long-term stress, and possible substance influence as contributing factors. What makes his story so striking is the contrast. A man who taught the world confidence and empowerment struggled privately with mistrust and inner turmoil. James Brown's life reminds us that public strength does not always reflect private reality. Even the most powerful voices can face battles that no stage, no spotlight, and no applause can silence. Marvin Gaye.
Mother, we don't need to escalate.
Few artists captured the soul of a generation like Marvin Gaye, known as the Prince of Motown. His masterpiece, What's Going On, wasn't just music. It was a mirror reflecting war, injustice, and inner conflict. His voice carried warmth, but also a quiet ache that listeners could feel long before they understood it. Behind that brilliance was a life marked by deep emotional struggle. Gaye endured a difficult childhood growing up under a strict and often abusive father, Marvin Gaye Sr. Those early experiences left lasting psychological scars, contributing to depression, anxiety, and periods of paranoia that intensified as fame and personal pressures mounted. By the early 1980s, he was battling not only inner turmoil, but also substance abuse and financial stress, creating a fragile mental state. In the days leading up to his death, Gaye reportedly expressed a chilling fear that his father might kill him. It sounded unimaginable, yet on April 1, 1984, that fear became reality. During a heated argument at their family home in Los Angeles, his father shot him. Marvin Gaye was just one day shy of his 45th birthday. The tragedy shocked the world, but it also revealed something deeper. The wounds Marvin carried were not only shaped by fame, but by family. His story is not just about a legendary voice silenced too soon, it's about how unresolved pain can follow a person for a lifetime. Marvin Gaye gave the world songs about love, healing, and understanding. Yet in the end, he became a heartbreaking reminder that even those who help others feel less alone can still be overwhelmed by battles within their own home. Florence Ballard.
Florence Ballard, 21, not married, still looking for my baby love.
Before the spotlight fully shifted, Florence Ballard was the original powerhouse behind the Supremes, a voice that helped define the early sound of Motown. Alongside Diana Ross and Mary Wilson, she stood at the center of a group that would become one of the most successful female acts of all time. But as the industry began to reshape the group's image, Ballard's role was gradually reduced, and by 1967 she was officially removed. That moment marked a devastating turning point. Stripped of her place in the group she helped build, Ballard struggled with severe depression and alcoholism. The transition from chart-topping success to instability was swift and unforgiving. Without the structure and support of Motown, her solo attempts faltered and financial difficulties mounted. Reports from those close to her describe a woman grappling with rejection, identity loss, and overwhelming emotional pain. While the narrative of her becoming homeless is often overstated, there is no denying that she faced serious financial hardship and lived far from the glamour she once knew. On February 22, 1976, Florence Ballard died at just 32 years old from complications related to heart disease. Her story is not simply about a fall from fame, it is about how quickly the industry can move on and how little protection artists sometimes have when they are no longer seen as marketable. Florence Ballard's legacy remains vital not only for her contributions to music, but as a reminder that behind every success story is a human being who deserves stability, dignity, and care long after the applause fades. Billy Wright. Long before flamboyance became a hallmark of rock and soul, Billy Wright was already rewriting the rules. With his bold makeup, processed hair, and theatrical stage presence, he helped pave the way for artists like Little Richard, influencing not just sound, but identity in American music. In the segregated South of the 1940s and 1950s, Wright stood out confident, stylish, and unapologetically different. But behind that striking image, his later years revealed a far more fragile reality. Accounts from friends and associates describe intense paranoia, with Wright believing he was constantly being watched or monitored. He reportedly suspected that even those closest to him had planted microphones in his home. These fears weren't fleeting. They shaped how he lived day to day, gradually pushing him into isolation. At one point, Wright withdrew almost completely from public life. He canceled performances, avoided social contact, and developed habits that reflected deep mistrust. It's said he struggled to stay in one place for long, sometimes refusing to sleep in the same location for more than a couple of nights. Over time, this pattern became a kind of self-imposed exile lasting for years. Unlike some artists, there is no widely confirmed medical diagnosis publicly documented for his condition. However, the consistency of these accounts points to a man dealing with profound psychological distress, likely without the support or understanding that might exist today. Billy Wright's story is a quiet tragedy. Beneath the glitter and innovation was someone who could no longer feel safe in his own world. His legacy lives on in the artists he inspired, but so does the reminder that even pioneers can be left alone with fears no one else can see. Jackie Wilson. Few performers embodied pure stage energy like Jackie Wilson. With electrifying moves, a powerful voice, and hits like Lonely Teardrops, he set the standard for modern showmanship, directly influencing future icons such as Michael Jackson. On stage, Wilson looked unstoppable, confident, charismatic, and in complete control. But behind that brilliance, there were signs of emotional and psychological strain. Accounts from colleagues and family describe periods of mood instability, intense pressure, and moments of distress that sometimes surfaced publicly. There were instances where he appeared overwhelmed, breaking down in tears or behaving unpredictably, suggesting that the demands of fame and personal struggles were taking a toll. The most devastating moment came on September 29, 1975. While performing Lonely Teardrops in New Jersey, Wilson suddenly collapsed on stage. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act. In reality, he had suffered a massive heart attack that caused severe brain damage due to lack of oxygen. He fell into a coma and remained in a minimally conscious state for nearly 9 years. During that time, he was physically alive but largely unresponsive. His once vibrant presence reduced to silence. He passed away in 1984 at the age of 49. Jackie Wilson's story is often remembered for that tragic fall, but the deeper truth is more complex. The applause never stopped, but behind it, there were warning signs that went unheard. His life reminds us that even the most dynamic performers can be struggling long before the spotlight fades, and that true support matters just as much as admiration. Betty Davis. Bold, fearless, and ahead of her time, Betty Davis redefined what it meant to be a woman in funk. As the former wife of Miles Davis, she was often linked to his legacy, but her own music was raw, provocative, and unapologetically independent. In the early 1970s, she pushed boundaries with themes of sexuality, power, and identity that the industry wasn't ready to accept. But that same intensity came at a cost. After releasing a series of controversial albums, Betty Davis abruptly stepped away from the spotlight. Over time, stories emerged describing extreme mood swings, long periods of isolation, and behavior that concerned those around her. While some later reports suggested she experienced symptoms consistent with bipolar disorder. There is no widely confirmed public medical record detailing a formal diagnosis, and many accounts remain anecdotal. One of the most striking and often repeated stories claims that she once opened her door unclothed to a journalist and declared, "Betty Davis is dead." Whether taken literally or symbolically, the moment reflects a deeper truth, a powerful artist distancing herself from the identity the world projected onto her. For decades, Davis lived largely out of the public eye, choosing silence over spectacle. Unlike many artists who chase comebacks, she never returned to the stage in a major way, leaving behind a legacy that feels both influential and unfinished. Her story isn't just about rebellion, it's about what happens when individuality collides with rejection. Betty Davis didn't simply disappear, she withdrew on her own terms. And in that silence, her life reminds us that sometimes what looks like defiance on the surface may actually be a deeply personal struggle to hold on to one's sense of self. Millie Jackson.
I finally worked my way up to the 4-letter.
Unfiltered, fearless, and decades ahead of her time, Millie Jackson carved out a lane no one else dared to enter. Blending soul spoken word and sharp social commentary, she tackled sex relationships and politics with a boldness that earned her the title Queen of Rap Soul. Her records weren't just music, they were conversations many were too afraid to have. But behind that commanding voice was a woman navigating intense emotional highs and lows. Those close to her have described dramatic mood swings, moments of deep vulnerability, followed by explosive confidence. Some reports have linked her behavior to symptoms consistent with bipolar disorder, though, as with many artists of her era, publicly confirmed medical details remain limited. One of the most striking stories captures that inner tension. During a live performance, Jackson reportedly walked to the edge of the stage, paused, then suddenly turned her back to the audience and stepped away, saying she felt as if the audience was going to eat me today. Whether driven by anxiety, overwhelm, or instinct, the moment revealed how even the most fearless performers can feel exposed under the spotlight. Yet Millie Jackson never allowed herself to be reduced to a label. In one of her most defining statements, she said, "I'm not crazy, I'm just reacting to a crazy world." That line doesn't just defend her, it reframes the narrative. Her story isn't about collapse, but endurance. She didn't disappear. She adapted, survived, and kept her voice intact. And in doing so, Millie Jackson reminds us that sometimes what looks like instability is actually a person refusing to stay silent in a world that demands it. Major Lance. At the height of Chicago's soul explosion, Major Lance stood as one of its brightest stars. With infectious hits like Monkey Time, he helped define the sound of the 1960s, smooth, rhythmic, and full of life. On stage, he was effortless, delivering joy and charisma that made audiences believe his success would last forever. But when the spotlight faded, the transition was brutal. As musical trends shifted and opportunities disappeared, Lance's career began to unravel. Without the structure and recognition that once defined him, those close to him noticed a gradual change, a loss of identity, confusion, and emotional withdrawal. Fame had given him a sense of purpose, and without it, he seemed to drift. In his later years, stories emerged that painted a deeply unsettling picture. Neighbors and acquaintances described moments where he appeared disconnected from reality, sitting alone, speaking to people who weren't there, as if holding on to conversations from a past life. In one haunting account, he reportedly stood before a small audience, paused, and quietly asked, "Who was I?" It wasn't just a question, it was a reflection of a man losing touch with the very identity that once made him whole. It's important to note that no widely confirmed medical diagnosis defines his condition. What remains are observations of a man struggling with the psychological aftermath of fame loss and isolation. Major Lance's story is not just about a career that faded, it's about what happens when the world moves on, but the person cannot. His legacy reminds us that success can shape identity, but when it disappears, it can leave behind a silence far more difficult to face than failure itself. Howard Tate. With a voice rich in pain and truth, Howard Tate was once hailed as one of the most emotionally powerful singers of his era. Admired by legends like Aretha Franklin, his recordings carried a depth that could move listeners to silence. Songs like "Get It While You Can" weren't just performances, they were lived experiences poured into melody. But everything changed in 1976 when his daughter tragically died in a car accident. That moment shattered him. Friends and colleagues described it as the point where Howard Tate emotionally collapsed, unable to process the loss. Grief consumed him, and instead of healing, he disappeared from the industry, from the spotlight, and nearly from memory. For years, no one knew where he was. Reports later revealed that he had been living on the margins of society, at times homeless, at times working odd jobs, carrying little more than memories. Some accounts describe him singing in unexpected places, even under bridges, his voice echoing not for fame, but for survival. In his wallet, he reportedly kept a photo of his daughter, a quiet symbol of a loss he never overcame. Eventually, Tate was rediscovered in the early 2000s and made a brief return to music, releasing new material and performing again. But those close to him believed he was never truly the same. Part of him remained in the past, anchored to the moment everything changed. His story is not about madness. It is about grief so deep, it reshapes reality. Howard Tate didn't simply walk away from the world. He was pulled into a place where memory and loss became his permanent home. And sometimes, no matter how strong the voice, there are pains that no song can heal. Sam Cooke. Few voices shaped modern soul like Sam Cooke. With timeless songs like "A Change Is Gonna Come," he helped bring soul music into the mainstream, crossing racial boundaries and redefining what black artistry could achieve in America. On the surface, he was elegance, control, and brilliance, a symbol of success in a divided era. But behind that polished image, the later years of his life were marked by personal turmoil and emotional strain. The tragic drowning of his young son in 1963, followed by marital breakdown, deeply affected him. Friends and associates later described changes in his behavior, moments of anxiety, restlessness, and increasing tension that suggested he was struggling internally. The night of December 11, 1964, remains one of the most controversial moments in music history. Cooke arrived at a Los Angeles motel under chaotic circumstances, reportedly agitated and disoriented. The motel manager, Bertha Franklin, claimed he forced his way into her office, leading her to shoot him in what was ruled self-defense. He was 33 years old. Accounts of that night vary, and over the decades, many questions have remained unanswered about his state of mind, the events leading up to the confrontation, and whether the full truth was ever revealed. Importantly, there is no confirmed medical diagnosis of mental illness in Cooke's case, and many descriptions of erratic behavior rely on retrospective testimonies rather than clinical evidence. Sam Cooke's story is often framed as mystery, but at its core lies something more human, a man dealing with grief pressure and a rapidly changing life. His legacy endures not only through his music, but through the questions his death left behind, questions that continue to echo just as powerfully as his voice. Don Covay. A gifted songwriter, behind the scenes Don Covay helped shape the sound of soul and R&B through songs recorded by icons like Aretha Franklin and Little Richard. Though he was not always the face on stage, his pen carried emotion, rhythm, and storytelling that defined an era. To many in the industry, he was a quiet genius, someone who could translate feeling into unforgettable music. But behind that talent was a man dealing with deep personal loss and psychological strain. The death of his sister, who had played a significant role in his life, marked a turning point. Those close to him described a descent into severe depression, anxiety, and episodes of paranoia. His behavior began to change, and he reportedly withdrew from both family and professional commitments. Some accounts from colleagues speak of unsettling moments in the studio times when Covay appeared to be speaking as if someone unseen were present, blurring the line between grief and perception. At one stage, he sought medical help and was admitted for psychiatric care. However, reports suggest he left treatment prematurely, insisting he did not belong there, reflecting the stigma and misunderstanding around mental health at the time. Importantly, while elements of his struggle are documented, many dramatic details remain anecdotal and should be approached with caution, as full clinical records are not publicly available. Don Covay's story is not one of failure, but of contrast. A man who helped others find their voice through music struggled to articulate his own pain. His legacy reminds us that creativity can mask suffering, and that even those who write the soundtrack to our lives may still be searching for peace within their own. Minnie Riperton. With a voice that could soar beyond limits, Minnie Riperton became a symbol of purity and beauty in music. Her timeless hit Lovin' You showcased an extraordinary whistle register that felt almost otherworldly, earning her a place among the most unique vocalists in R&B history. On stage, she embodied grace and control, every note precise, every emotion sincere. But behind that angelic sound, her later years were shaped by fear, uncertainty, and emotional strain. In 1976, at just 31 years old, Riperton was diagnosed with breast cancer. At a time when public conversations about illness were limited, especially for performers, she carried much of that burden quietly while continuing to work. The pressure of facing a life-threatening condition while staying in the spotlight took a visible toll on her mental well-being. Those around her recalled moments of intense anxiety, insomnia, and emotional overwhelm. There are anecdotal reports of her becoming deeply distressed during recording sessions or public appearances, at times stepping away to compose herself. Some stories describe episodes where she felt unusually fearful or disoriented, though claims of hallucinations are not medically confirmed and should be treated cautiously. Despite everything, Riperton continued to perform and advocate for cancer awareness, even appearing on television to speak openly about her diagnosis, an act of courage rarely seen at the time. She passed away on July 12, 1979, at the age of 31. Minnie Riperton's story is not one of weakness, but of contrast. A voice that reached extraordinary heights was in her final years, grounded by very human fear. Her legacy reminds us that even the most beautiful sound can carry unseen weight, and that strength often exists alongside vulnerability. LaVern Baker. A trailblazer in early R&B, LaVern Baker rose to fame with hits like Tweedledee, becoming one of the first black female artists to break into the American mainstream. Her voice was bold, confident, and full of life, helping shape the foundation of modern rhythm and blues during a time of deep racial division. But success came with a cost. Baker worked in an industry marked by racial discrimination, unfair contracts, and limited control over her own career. One of the most documented struggles she faced was the issue of white artists covering black musicians' songs and achieving greater commercial success, often without proper credit or compensation. Baker even formally petitioned U.S. Congress in the 1950s to address these inequities, an early and courageous stand for artists' rights. Over time, the pressure of the industry and repeated setbacks took a toll. By the late 1960s, after her career momentum slowed, Baker made a life-changing decision. She stepped away from the spotlight entirely. She moved to the Philippines, where she worked as an entertainer on U.S. military bases for nearly 2 decades, living largely outside the public eye. While some narratives dramatize her departure as a psychological collapse, there is no confirmed evidence of a specific mental illness diagnosis. Instead, her story reflects burnout, disillusionment, and the emotional impact of systemic injustice. LaVern Baker eventually returned to the United States in the late 1980s and was later inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1991, receiving long overdue recognition. Her journey is not about disappearance, but choice. Walking away from fame can be an act of survival, and in Baker's case, it stands as a quiet but powerful reminder that sometimes stepping out of the light is the only way to protect what remains inside. O.V. Wright. Few voices carried pain as vividly as O.V. Wright. Known for his raw, gospel-infused delivery, he could make every lyric feel like a confession. Songs like "That's How Strong My Love Is" didn't just reach listeners, they pierced straight through them, turning heartbreak into something almost sacred. But behind that emotional power was a man gradually losing his footing. As his career progressed, Wright struggled with substance abuse and deepening depression, both of which began to affect his mental clarity and stability. Those close to him recalled moments where he seemed disoriented, withdrawn, or emotionally overwhelmed, far from the commanding presence audiences expected. On stage, the cracks sometimes became visible. There are accounts of performances where he would repeat the same line over and over, unable to move forward as if trapped inside the emotion of the song. In other moments, he appeared confused, reportedly asking band members questions like, "Where are we?" a chilling sign of how blurred his sense of reality had become. Despite attempts by those around him to intervene, Wright often resisted help, insisting he wasn't sick, only struggling. That distinction, common at the time, reflects a broader issue. Mental health was rarely understood or openly addressed, especially in the high-pressure world of touring musicians. O.V. Wright died in 1980 at the age of 41. His story is not just about decline, it's about contradiction. A man whose voice helped others release their pain was quietly overwhelmed by his own. And perhaps that's why his music still resonates so deeply today, because every note carries not just beauty, but truth. Esther Phillips. A prodigy with a voice far beyond her years, Esther Phillips rose to fame as a teenager with a sound that could break hearts in a single note. Guided early in her career by Johnny Otis, she quickly became known for her emotional ballad songs that felt lived in even when she was still growing up. But that early success came at a cost. From a young age, Phillips was exposed to the harsh realities of the music industry. Long tours, constant pressure, and environments where substance use was common. By her late teens, she was already battling heroin addiction, a struggle that would follow her for much of her life. Alongside it came periods of depression and emotional instability, making it difficult to maintain both her health and career momentum. There are accounts that capture just how visible that struggle became. During one performance, she reportedly stood motionless on stage for nearly a minute, silent, frozen, before breaking down into uncontrollable tears. Moments like that blurred the line between performer and person, revealing the toll that years of pressure and addiction had taken. Phillips sought help multiple times, entering rehabilitation and attempting comebacks. She even achieved renewed success in the 1970s, proving her resilience and enduring talent. Yet the cycle of recovery and relapse remained a constant battle. She passed away in 1984 at the age of 48, with long-term substance abuse contributing to her declining health. Esther Phillips' story is not just about addiction. It's about what happens when immense talent meets an industry that demands everything too early and too fast. Her voice gave the world unforgettable emotion, but behind it was a life shaped by struggles that began long before she had the power to choose her own path. James Carr. Few voices in soul music carried as much raw, unfiltered pain as James Carr. Often called the embodiment of deep soul, his performances weren't just emotional, they felt lived as if every note came from a place of real suffering. Songs like The Dark End of the Street didn't just move listeners, they haunted them, revealing a depth that few artists could match. But behind that extraordinary voice was a devastating reality. Carr was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a condition that affected his memory perception and sense of safety. Over time, he began experiencing hallucinations and intense paranoia, often believing that someone was trying to harm him. These episodes made it difficult for him to perform consistently, as even the stage, once his sanctuary, became a place of fear. There are moments in his career that illustrate just how severe his struggle became. During a performance in Japan, Carr reportedly fell to his knees mid-song, crying out, "Don't hurt me anymore." The show had to be stopped. For the audience, it was shocking. For those who knew him, it was a heartbreaking glimpse into a mind under constant attack. His condition also led to practical challenges. He would forget lyrics, lose track of where he was, or abruptly withdraw from tours. As a result, his career never reached the heights his talent deserved, despite widespread recognition of his voice as one of the greatest in soul history. James Carr's story is not just about lost potential, it's about truth. The pain in his music wasn't an act, it was real. And perhaps that's why his voice still resonates today, because it carries something deeper than performance. It carries the sound of a man fighting a battle he could never fully escape. Little Willie John. A powerhouse voice behind the classic Fever, Little Willie John was one of the most intense performers of early R&B, so influential that even Elvis Presley held deep respect for his talent. On stage, he was magnetic. His voice carried urgency, passion, and a raw edge that set him apart from his peers. But off stage, his life was marked by volatile behavior and emotional instability. Those who knew him often described a man with a quick temper, prone to sudden outbursts, and at times deeply suspicious of others. While no formal, widely confirmed psychiatric diagnosis defines his condition, many accounts suggest he struggled with impulse control and possible paranoia, blurring the line between anger and deeper psychological distress. The turning point came in 1964. During an altercation at a nightclub, Willie John fatally stabbed a man. He was arrested, convicted of manslaughter, and sentenced to prison. The incident shocked fans and effectively ended his career. According to reports from those around him during that time, he maintained that he hadn't acted on his own will at one point, claiming that something else had driven his actions, a statement often interpreted as a sign of his unstable state of mind rather than a literal belief. While incarcerated, his health declined rapidly. He died in prison in 1968 at the age of 30. Little Willie John's story is not just about a fall from grace, it's about how unaddressed emotional turmoil can spiral into irreversible consequences. His talent was undeniable, but without support or intervention, that intensity turned inward and outward in destructive ways. In the end, his legacy stands as both brilliance and warning proof that even the most gifted voices can be overwhelmed by battles no one else sees. These 21 black R&B legends possessed voices that healed millions, yet silently battled devastating mental illness behind the spotlight. Their tragic stories expose the dark price of fame in an era that offered no help. Were they truly crazy, or did the industry and society push fragile geniuses to the breaking point? What do you think? Comment below.